Hey, what's going on, everybody? Thank you for tuning into the Triple Double podcast with Corey Albertson and Jason Morrow. And this episode you're about to listen to, Coach Babe Kwasniak, Villa Angela St. Joe's High School in Cleveland. And you're going to be hearing from a guy who's won a lot of basketball games, but you're going to be hearing from a guy who's done a whole hell of a lot more with his life. And I love everybody who's ever been a guest on this episode, but I think this might be my favorite episode we've ever recorded. And I say that because what Coach Babe talks about in terms of real life experience, applying that to basketball, and just the gratitude that everyone should have in terms of the opportunity to be around a game like the game of basketball is just extremely enthralling. So again, thank you for listening to this episode. Really, really exciting one with Coach Babe Kwasniak, and you're listening to the Triple Double podcast.
The Detroit Pistons select Luke Kennard from Duke University. The Utah Jazz select Darius Bazley from Cincinnati, Ohio.
Ladies and gentlemen, welcome to another episode of the Triple Double podcast. My name is Corey Albertson of Triple Double Prospects. We've got Jason Morrow of 270 Hoops on as our producer, and today's guest is Coach Babe Kwasniak. Coach, what's going on with you?
Hey, Corey. Thanks for having me on. I appreciate everything you and Jason do for high school hoops in Ohio, man. Really appreciate you guys.
Absolutely. Thank you very much, and we appreciate you coming on. So, Babe Kwasniak, head basketball coach at Villa Angela St. Joe's High School in Cleveland, Ohio, where he's been coached there since 2010, has won 3 state titles, appeared in a total of 5 consecutive state tournaments. And, Coach, you guys have built quite the – well, not built because I know your father started something way back when, but you guys have continued a great tradition over at VASJ.
Yeah, you made it sound pretty good there, didn't you, brother? I appreciate it. Yeah, no, we've had a good run. We've been blessed to have really good players. First off, I mean, I don't care, who you are and how good your culture is. If you don't have good players, I mean, there's a lot of guys that are a lot better coaches than me that never made it down to Columbus. So, and this, Corey. I mean, there's been some great teams that happen to get knocked off too. That just for whatever reason, you need a lot of things to go right and. I mean, high school hoops in Ohio has just been such a near and dear spot in my heart. I mean, ever since I was a little boy, I remember going down and as early as 1989. I remember my dad's team lost to a guy by the name of Jimmy Jackson. I was sitting under the basket at the old St. John Arena. So, I mean, not just St. Joe's, but hoops in general. High school hoops in Ohio has just been something that I've just kind of grown up with, and been blessed to kind of be steering the ship for the last 10 years of the school that I went to, man. So it's pretty special.
In parts of the country where basketball is big, I don't think they understand how in a few places, and Cleveland is one of them, Cincinnati is one of them, how big Catholic school basketball can be in terms of the culture and the program, how big of a deal it is in the school, how big of a deal it is in the community. And like you said, having won state titles as a player, having coached in 1 state titles as a coach, I mean, how big of a part of your life has St. Joe's, Villa Angela St. Joe's been for you?
Oh, yeah, no, it's been everything for me. It's been kind of the fabric of who I am, and not just me, but my family. And when I hear you say that, I always think of this past year we lost the great Geno Ford. And one of my favorite stories, Corey, is every year we get a chance, obviously to go down to Columbus. Now we've been blessed, like you said, we went there five years in a row, playing in it. But these last couple of years, I've actually probably get people mad at me for saying this, but I've actually had a chance to enjoy myself more, just kind of going down there and, just hanging out. And so many people say, hey, you're the coach of St. Joe's. And, so many folks, I mean, everybody knows my dad down there. And they always mention Clark Kellogg and his 51-point game in 1979. But the first year we were blessed enough to make it down was in 2013. And I forget where we were staying. I mean, it was by the old, it wasn't the old Holiday Inn that had St. John's, but we were at like a Radisson or something, and these 2 guys start telling the story about in 1992 when Cambridge played Villangelo St. Joseph. And I mean, you can't make this up. Like, we were at a restaurant, and these two guys were saying how, you never forget '92 when the coach from Cambridge was down one, but he was holding the basketball, and he was yelling, at the Villangelo St. Joseph coach. He's like, how long? And my dad at the time was actually the assistant. He wasn't even the head coach, and they were best of friends. And he was, my dad yelled at him. He said, "Hey, Gino, you gonna hold the ball?" And he's like, "Yeah, I'm gonna hold the ball. You got all the players. I'll sit there and I'll hold it for 4 minutes to get one shot." And these guys are sitting there telling the story, not knowing that, it was my dad that, that they were talking about. And I'm like, what are the chances these guys are telling a story about, a game in 1992 and a game that I actually played and I was a sophomore in that game. So there's just been so many kind of memories like that that are irreplaceable.
The state of Ohio, it's a big state, but the basketball community, especially some of those guys who've been going to state tournaments for 50 years. I mean, it's a small community, and yeah, that's awesome. And that's the positive. Talking, again, going back on the theme of the Catholic school basketball and how big it is in parts of the state of Ohio, Cleveland, again, being a huge area for that type of basketball. There's also a lot of drama associated with it. And I think ultimately, while guys are thinking that they're tearing it down by, talking bad about the Catholic schools, all you really do, in my opinion, is make everybody kind of envious of them and bring the kids in those schools closer together. And there's certainly a thought that goes, if they're not talking bad about you, you're probably not doing everything the right way.
Yeah, I mean, to a point, Corey, and I know you keep harping on the Catholic school thing, but it's just a good product in general. I mean, shoot, man. I mean, some of my favorite memories are going down and watching the lowest division games, the D4 games, and just watching how an entire town, gets behind their team. I mean, in 2013 we beat Leipzig, and part of it's like, okay, we had 5 Division I guys on that team, right? But they hung with us for a while, but we beat them, and it's not like we put ourselves in Division IV that year, Corey. Our school was on the outs. It was about to close, and we couldn't control our enrollment. And but I think things of that nature. Some that's what makes the Ohio State tournament so special, right? It's just watching the entire towns, get behind their school. I remember a couple of years ago. Nobody thought anybody was going to beat Cornerstone Christian in Division IV. Who was it? Marion Local, Corey, that beat them.
Yeah, it was. They had a couple of overtime games. Yep.
You would have said, hey, they would have needed 20 things to go right, and that's exactly what happened. And here's the thing. I mean, people are going to have that discussion. Of course, I guess I'm a purist. I guess I'm a traditionalist, and the system's been really good for us. So I guess it's easy for me to say, yeah, keep it the way it is. But I just love. I've been all over the country. I mean, through the military, I was in 37 countries, and then I lived everywhere. I've lived in Seattle. I've lived in New York. I've lived in Atlanta, Texas. And like you said, we have such a great product here. I tell all my buddies, man. And of course, I'm biased with the Army-Navy game, but the Ohio State tournament is just one of the best things, that you'll ever go to. And I know, hey, here's what I do know, Corey. Like, they got the right guy steering the ship. I think with Mr. Snodgrass, we've never had a commissioner who's going to hear our voice. And, I think it's going to teeter-tot both ways. And, I've heard Eric Flannery from St. Ed's. He said it best, like, hey, man, there's to be no private schools in Division IV. I totally agree with that. I think that way, for the small schools who can't grab kids from other area codes, that'd be like a good way to start in terms of, I don't want to sit there and make this whole podcast about competitive balance, but I think that'd be a great way, to kind of go. And I can't speak for Drew. I can't speak for others, teams that have done really well in the lower divisions, but it's not like we can pick our division. Back in 2015 when we had, three high major players, it's not like we choose to be in Division III. If we could choose, we would of course play in the highest one. That's what makes it fun. But our kids don't, they don't pick that. They don't pick the division. We can just do the best we can do with what's in front of us.
Well, you talked about your military service, and I think anyone that follows you knows about it. It's certainly something that you're very open about. And what I wanted you to talk about is getting back into coaching, getting into the culture of your guys' program that is gone for, you said 79 with Clark. It's gone for 40 years here, and in that, when you look at the military perspective, winning isn't an option; it's the only option. And to talk about how your experience in the military and similar fields of work have prepared you and help you when it comes to teaching, as coaching, just working with younger kids.
Well, I think I've probably changed a lot, Corey. And when I started doing this, I'm 43 now. So when I took the job at St. Joe's, I was 33, and as a matter of fact, there was a story this summer where a kid kind of looked back to me and Derek Pardon, who played at Northwestern, who's now over playing in Italy, said, "Man, Coach, if that was me, you would have had me around the neck." And I said, "Well, Derek, it's three things. Number one, I'm older, right, and I can't act like I did when I was 33. Number two is times have changed, and coaches,
Mm-hmm.
it's just in terms of discipline, it's just a lot harder to administer discipline like my father and other old school coaches did to me, and then." And the third piece is, and probably the most important for me, is I have my own kids now, Corey, and every minute I spend with my knucklehead players now, God bless them, is time I'm spending away from my own family. But yeah, I made the decision to go to West Point back in 1994. My guidance counselor, got a letter from them, and was saying that they had interest in me as a basketball player. And her exact words were, don't even apply to there. You have no chance of getting in. That's kind of when I decided I want to go to West Point. And everything good that I have in my life, to include my wife and my family, stems from the United States Military Academy. And at the time, the only reason I went there was it was my only chance of playing Division I basketball. And now looking back, one being least important, most important, and 100 being least important. Like, to play in Division I basketball is probably 100. Everything from loving my country to a sense of duty, to a sense of living with integrity, to understanding leadership. All comes from that decision to go to West Point. And that's why I believe God's done everything, for a reason. And you come to a practice of ours, and I've heard college coaches say, they'll actually kind of joke that it looks more like a military unit than it does a basketball team. Coach Huggins says it to me, and I take it as a compliment. And we just people use discipline and structure in such a negative fashion. And I was told a long time ago by General Bob Brown, who's a 4-star general who played for Coach K at West Point. He said, you got to be two things. You got to be one of two things in order to be successful in life. You got to be either very, very intelligent, or you got to be very organized. So he said, Captain Kwasniak, you better get organized. And that's just something I've always kind of took to heart, and I've always tried to be that way with my teams, and fortunately it's worked out for us.
You say duty, and obviously when you talk at the military level, duty means the potential of having to put your life on the line for your country. But in terms of coaching basketball, what is an example of duty for what the expectations or the standards are for the kids to play basketball at VASJ?
Well, do what you're supposed to do when you're supposed to do it. And if you want to be great at anything, you gotta overcome those expectations. So many kids. I've said this, Corey, and I've tweeted this before. How many kids work as hard as they think they do, right? And I've told, I've had this conversation with my dad. How many kids? I've asked my dad. I said, how many kids worked as hard as I did, right? So I have been coaching here for 10 years, and I think we've had 7 or 8 kids on full scholarship that have paid nothing for college. And I was a 5'11" white guy, and not very athletic, and I had just worked extremely hard, and then it's changed so much now. These kids all have personal trainers, and for all this stuff. But at the end of the day, you have to own your own development. That's just so crucial. It's just so important. And I don't know if that's just a VASJ thing. I think that's a life thing, right? And I guess as I've gotten older and as I've taken on more responsibility, I think I've kind of maybe migrated from the fact that, hey, man, yeah, I want to be this, I want to be a winning basketball coach to, hey, I want to impact lives, right? I want to be How many doctors am I going to produce? How many lawyers? How many great contributors to society am I going to produce? And I actually said this one year. I was at Steph Curry camp, and someone asked me what my biggest accomplishment was, and I said, it was going to 5 straight state championship games. And I almost felt embarrassed afterwards because the more I think about it, I've had 8 guys serve the armed forces. And this, Corey, in this day and age, we're fighting entitlement every day as a high school basketball coach, and it's not just high school kids, but kids in general just think people owe them something. And I tell them, your teachers don't owe you anything, your coaches don't owe you anything, and this is going to blow your mind, your parents don't owe you anything. So the number one way to fight entitlement is by gratitude. If you're grateful for what you do have, it's going to be hard to be entitled for what you don't have. And the fact that I've had 7 guys now. Now it's 8 guys. I'm going to count Gene Higgins at the Citadel because he's going to eventually serve his country. You have 8 guys. That's joining the armed forces. To me, is the highest form of selfless service. Is saying, hey, coach, I want to be a part of something bigger than myself. And there's no better form of gratitude than that. And that's by far the number one thing I'm the most proud of.
Well, you said entitlement, and that's tremendous. And you also said personal trainers, and there's a lot of great things about personal trainers. We've had at least one on the podcast over the course of the, 16, 17 months we've been doing this. But what you're fighting today, and you said you're 43, but you're kind of an older soul, and I think I am too in many ways when it comes to basketball, is that today's society is so hard to preach team. And I think there's something going on which I like to call celebration culture. And it starts with the kids watching the NBA. And this isn't the kids' fault. This is what they see on TV, where the NBA is sometimes such an individualized sport. And then I think the other big piece, and I really see this, just to be brutally honest, I see this a lot in Northeast Ohio because there's a couple of high-profile outlets. When you look at the YouTube and the, showing of highlights, maybe talking about his stats, and, I know at least one of those guys isn't necessarily a huge fan of you, but that stuff doesn't help you coach team. It focuses on the me, and that has got to be for somebody like you who comes from the military background. It's got to be making you want to pull your hair out and trying to figure out, how can I drill this into my own guys' heads? How can I minimize their distractions to all the other stuff outside of our school?
Yeah, no, it doesn't. I don't know if it bothers me anymore like it used to. Maybe it did at one point. I think I've gotten pretty comfortable in who I am. One of my best friends is the coach at Youngstown State, and he always tells me I'm not a very good coach all the time. So I've gotten pretty used to, kind of hearing that. And my goal is, like I said, is to produce upstanding, is take boys and turn them into men. Is turn them into, hey, what kind of father they're going to be, what kind of husband they're going to be, what kind of Christian they're going to be. And it's everywhere, right, Corey? We've individualized the team sport. I know, like I've read. You guys do rankings, right? I've read the triple-double rankings before with you guys. I know it's. I've seen it with ESPN, and heck, man. I could shoot those. I could shoot those down. They're like opinions. Everybody has one, right? Steph Curry was nowhere near the top 100, and his dad begged Virginia Tech to take him. I had a kid, Derek Pardon, who ended up being one of the best players. You covered him well down in Columbus. Ended up being one of the best players in the history of Northwestern. Wasn't a top 100 kid. Nobody was talking about him. And it's just. I think it's just where society has gone, and it goes everywhere, Corey. I've been August 12th. I was sworn in as the youngest civilian aide to the Secretary of the Army, and one of my pillars for my job is we're trying to dig into this suicide rate. We have 22 veterans, that are committing suicide a day, and that's really sad, and that's something that hopefully we can put a dent in and stop. And one of the things that we were studying in terms of the data and the analysis is, and the analytics is, suicide in general is just more prevalent, right, Corey? Mass shootings are more prevalent. It's just a different world, brother. You know what I mean? It's just a different, it's just a different day and age. But it doesn't, here's what I do know. Kids still want discipline, and discipline is a form of love. And people, they automatically associate discipline with a negative connotation. the word discipline means a choice. So I try to teach my kids, voices and choices. Who are you listening to? And good decision, bad decision, what your decision? So what decision are you making? And, I'll steal this from my old man because he says all the time, kids really haven't changed that much. Things don't change. People do. What's changed are the parents. The parents have been, the big part that has changed just in terms of, and we're dealing with it in education too. It used to be, hey, what did my son do wrong in your class? Now it's what did the teacher do wrong, teaching my son or my daughter. And that's been probably the biggest obstacle. And my God, I know I'm not the only one alone in this. I think it's, ran just so many great coaches, out of the business because, like, you know this, Corey, like, guys don't do this for the money, right? Like, and, do you do it for the prestige? Guys do it because they love young people. And in my case, they love the game. And especially in my case, I love the school that I'm at. And I love the type of kids that I get to coach. You keep harping on, the public and private. I don't know what kind of public school kid coach I would be, meaning I just love the fact that, I love the fact that, our kids have to wear a uniform and how they act is more important than how we play. And that's just suited for me because, I just consider myself more of a leader than I do a basketball coach.
Well, talking about public versus private, let me say this, and I probably should have led with this, which is, I was blessed enough to have an opportunity to attend private school, and private, especially, again, Catholic in Cincinnati is just as big, maybe bigger than it is in Cleveland. So it's a huge part of the culture, and it's something that I enjoy. I enjoy the culture aspect of the private schools in basketball. And there are some great public schools that operate with just as much discipline, if not more. When you look at a Mentor, when you look at a Westerville South, when you look at a Lakota East, down my way, there's a bunch of them. So Hilliard Bradley, I heard Jason say in the background, is another one. Absolutely. So, it's generalizing it. And then the other thing I wanted to mention that you brushed on, and you made a great point, which is the rankings aspect. And that's a controversial topic. And I can't tell you how many conversations I've had with John Stovall, Chaz Wolf, Kurt Stubbs, guys who I look up to, and, they each have a very, very different opinion on, as someone who, produces information for college coaches, as scouting service operator, what should I put online for the public and what should I not put online? And, there's the variables of branding it. There's the variables of, a million different things.
You've gotten some hot water before. I remember that. Yeah. And
yeah.
And your first problem is you say you look at the Chaz Wolf. So if you want to take that one back,
right,
on record, I completely understand if you want to take that one back. That's your
well, no
problem.
one.
No one. I'll speak to that. I'll go off subject real quick and speak to that, which is that I took a lot of heat for putting what I still stand by as a very honest evaluation of an attitude problem of a certain young player, and the high school people in Cleveland, a lot of them didn't appreciate the honesty and my choice of words on it. And Chaz was the first one to jump to my side, and he's actually the one who told me about the blowback when it got leaked, because what happened was it was emailed out to college coaches, and for some reason a coach who I still 5 years later haven't identified, I can't wait till I do, shared it with the high school. But what Chaz and I spoke to, and you're talking about accountability, you're talking about discipline, and it speaks into right exactly why I word things the way I word them, Coach, which is if I don't tell you as a college coach subscribes to my service, this kid has an attitude problem, I'm not only screwing the kid, but bigger, I'm screwing you, the college coach subscribes to my service. And what I really believe this is, I am violating my integrity for when 2 years from now I tell him about a kid that plays for VASJ, and I tell him, Coach, this kid's really coachable, he's got a great attitude, and that coach is going to say, well, you told me this kid didn't have an attitude and he was difficult to deal with, so I can't believe you. So that's why I choose where it would come.
Understand that. And listen, man, like I do this all the time. Like these search firms, they have search. To me, like, why have athletic directors when you have why have these search firms when you have these athletic directors, right? Like, so I worked for a cancer diagnostics company for 9 years. I managed a $47 million book of business, and the most important thing I did was who I hired, who I fired. Now, at the end of the day, I use search firms to bring people to the table, which is exactly what you do, what Chaz does. But at the end of the day, like,
Absolutely.
coach it's not about having confidence in that kid. It's about having confidence in yourself to know what you're looking for in that kid. And you know what? I mean, Corey, if a coach doesn't have that, that's not your problem. That's his. Let me say this because, this is America, man, and you can make your own way. And I tell my kids, nobody owes you anything. You get what you work for. I mean, I think a lot of times too, it's the same thing with you guys. And I'll give you an example on my end. Like when TJ Petros first came out, like I just wasn't a fan of his. I'm like, man, this guy's pulling stuff out of his rear end. TJ, I mean, he works his absolute tail off. And I've, just grown to just have a respect for him. I'm not always going to agree with, everything he thinks, and I'm sure he's not going to agree with everything that I think. But it's just like, a kid that I'm coaching. Like, hey, man, if you work and you go as hard as you can every day, eventually I'm gonna trust you more. You can't have trust without the truth. And a big part of building that trust is putting in the work. And you guys are no different. And I think you guys are a big fabric of what we do, Corey. I mean, Kurt, Stubbsy, and Ticket. I mean,
semi-retired Stubbs.
Yeah. Well, and I've told Mr. Snodgrass. I said, sure, hey, look, man, like. Well, let's face it. I mean, like this AP poll is a joke. I mean, in 2015, we were 10th in the AP poll, and we were like, we lost to Oak Hill by 2 points in overtime. Like, come on, man. And I've always my suggestion to him was, hey, man, this is what these guys do. They're junkies. They're savants. Like, I mean, and they've seen everybody, and they talk to each other. So, my thing to him was, hey, man, let these guys intertwine and let them take the onus off. I mean, you're taking them off, off the voters who, quite frankly, have never seen these teams and have definitely never seen these kids. And what happens in the long run, Corey? You get a guy like Derek Parton who ends up being all Big Ten, who was never all Ohio. I mean, it's kind of a joke when it comes to that, and that's not really fair, by the kid.
No, it's not. It's not. There's a lot that goes with that too, which is it comes down to this. You guys are playing Oak Hill Academy. Derek Parton has 10 points and 8 rebounds, maybe. That's a really good game. However, there's a kid from a small town that had 42 points and 27 rebounds, but he played against somebody who you guys would have beat by 100, and maybe he would have scored 10 points against you guys. So there's a lot of factors there. But going back to what you said about TJ Petros, and we're very tight. We have a lot of conversation. We look at a lot of things the same way. And I can tell you this, and I can speak for TJ, which is we get plenty of stuff wrong. I will be the first to admit it. I'm not embarrassed by it because I can tell you, and TJ's the same way, if our opinion is wrong, it doesn't come down to a effort level. It comes down to we were just wrong. Maybe we don't know as much basketball as we think we do. We were just wrong. And, there's all types of theories with that. But one thing I'm big in is, engagement. And I want to do a couple things I always say on this podcast and to people I see is at this point in my life, I've got a full-time job. I do a couple other things. I'm only going to do things in basketball that I'm going to be engaged in and things that I'm going to enjoy. And, this is one of them. And for that, I'm going to put all my effort into it. And I actually went to practice at the University of Cincinnati last week. And one thing that Coach Brandon told his kids is he said, if you're not coming in to practice with what he said is a teachable spirit, then you're wasting your time. And that if you think you've got all the answers, then you're wasting your time. You're never going to get better. You can't get better if you think you have the answers. No one has all the answers. And, the term teachable spirit really hit me because I know TJ Petros is a great example of that dude spends more time watching, reading about different scouts, reading about different college coaches. How can I get better than anybody? And, his engagement level is so high that, that's going to lead to improvement.
Sure. No, I remember a couple years ago, being this is when the Cavs were playing the Warriors in the finals, and I remember we were doing film sessions with Steph Curry, and I remember, I can remember him saying, well, I would make this move here, but Coach Curry doesn't like me holding on to the ball that long, and not to be, like a LeBron hater, but I remember at that point is right when David Blatt got fired, and I remember thinking, like, I don't think those words would come out of LeBron's mouth. I don't think he'd be like, well, this is not what Coach Blatt wants, right? And not to knock LeBron, he's the GOAT when it comes to Ohio. Well, I probably shouldn't say that either because Clark Kellogg was pretty good over at St. Joe's. But you know what I mean? I guess my point is, if Steph Curry can be that coachable and be that open, to be taught. I was just telling one of my young kids, Jaden Hamid, who's super skilled, got a chance to be really, really good. I said, hey man, like this is, I was telling him some Steph Curry stories. Like he never leaves a workout until he swishes 5 free throws. Like, the coaching staff, your parents, they can't want to do it for you. Like greatness is something that you have to, there's one thing to want to be great, and it's another thing to achieve greatness. And the only way to achieve greatness is through work. And I feel with what you're saying because it's the same thing in any profession, right? I don't care if you're running a military unit. I don't care if you're, running a $47 million cancer diagnostics business unit or coaching high school basketball. If you don't put in the work, it's going to show. It's definitely going to show. And TJ is a great example because I just feel like, my dad's always had a gift for just looking at kids and saying, this guy's good or this guy's, and he gave TJ a compliment a couple it might have been, a couple months ago. And he said, man, TJ, my dad said, man, that TJ Peters guy works his tail off. And, he's gotten to the point where I didn't think real highly of his opinion and now I value it. And TJ was like, man, what a great compliment coming from Papa. So, if you work, Corey, it'll always show. And if you don't work, unfortunately, that'll show too.
Absolutely. It's just about being accountable and, in whatever you do. And like you said, it applies to everything. And one thing I've tried to do is, starting this podcast obviously stemmed from me listening to a lot of podcasts about a lot of different things. And, like a lot of people, I listen to Joe Rogan. And when he has serious episodes, I like to always try and take notes as to, what can we apply to how we format our podcast and everything. And, going back to all of this, he had, and I wanted to bring this up to you because, having the military background, he had a guy on last week who I'm sure you're familiar with named Dakota Meyer. And, Dakota Meyer, yeah, of course. And Dakota Meyer talked about controlling. Yeah, he's nuts. And he talked about controlling your dash. And what he meant by that is, you can't control the day you're born. You can't control the day that you die, but you can control the dash in between, meaning everything that happens from when you're born until when you die. And, that relates back to what you just said about Jaden Hamid, which is, a good guard, a very skilled guard, a kid who's not gifted at being 6'6". He's not gifted at being, this elite jumper, but he's a tough kid who loves basketball and he's working on it. And, he's doing what he can do, and that's what you do in your program, which is, control your dash, be accountable for your own improvement, which all goes back to what you said at the beginning and, trying to coach team in today's era of individual.
Yeah, no. Yeah, and I don't know how, it's probably the least amount of talent we've had going into this year, but Jaden's about as skilled as any kid I've ever had. And then we got another kid, Jonah Wag, who nobody really knows about yet, who, Corey, I don't say this lightly. He's got the ability to be as good as good of a prospect as I've had. He's got the God-given ability, and I just wouldn't throw that out there lightly. He's just got a lot of things that, that you can't teach, and we talk about that all the time in our program. As control what you can, kind of forget about what you can't. In the military, that was always beat on us. And Dakota's a mesmerizing speaker. He's a tremendous speaker. And that's a lot of things. Is mental toughness. A lot of times comes down to being comfortable, being uncomfortable, right? And that's the thing where my guys, I don't know if they truly appreciate that yet, or truly embrace that yet, or even know what that feels like yet. And that's just something that you have to. You have to get in order to be great. In the military, you train like you fight. That's why we would do live fires with live bullets, and so we would train the fact that when we actually got to battle, it was easier. And I feel like practices are the same way for us. We make practice so hard, we're so demanding that when they get in the game, hopefully it's easier. About as big of a compliment as I can get is when Chris Collins or Bill Self or Marty Simmons at Evansville or Doug Bacham at Citadel, and they call me and they say, listen, Coach, this kid's, he gets it. He gets it. Getting yelled at's a skill. There's nothing I can say to bother him, and you can tell like it's just an easy assimilation into this program because he's used to it.
Well, yeah, absolutely. And one of my probably my biggest point of pride as a basketball player, and I was not a good player, marginal in high school at best, was, I had a group of seniors in my class that knew each other for a long time and really hated to lose to each other and really loved basketball. And, one thing we were going to do was practice hard every day. And we had a freshman that played a lot on the team. And I remember talking to him the day of the first game, my freshman year of college, his sophomore year of high school. And he told me, he's like, Corey, man, with you guys gone, practices are just so easy now. And I always remember that as kind of like my big point of pride that, we weren't as good as him, but we certainly, put more effort into it. And, that means a lot to me. But the last thing I want to talk about in terms of principles, in terms of pillars, is a word you used earlier, is something I know you're big on in communicating with your kids about basketball and about life outside of basketball. And that's just gratitude. And you touched on it earlier, but from someone who has the military background, you look at perspective. And, if you lose if you lose a state championship game, which you have had to deal with, it's no fun to lose that game, but it beats having to go to war, for example.
Yeah, I have lost to Frank Kill. That's pretty bad, man. You lose to Frank Kill, that's even worse.
Right.
Because then you got to live with it for the rest of your life. I in my social media, Corey, you've probably seen my hashtag is winners win, and I think a lot of times what gets confused in that is, people think I'm talking about the scoreboard, and that's not at all what I'm talking about. A lot of times, really, the only way to really fail at something is to quit and is to not give your best. And, I get a chance to go around the country and delivering keynote speeches. And a big part of my story is like I told you, I've talked about PTSD, talk about post-traumatic stress syndrome. And when it comes to the American soldier, a big misconception of PTSD is that it comes with, killing somebody or watching someone be killed. A big part for me was guilt. And that is the number one component of post-traumatic stress syndrome for a soldier, is the guilt that they let their buddy down. And in my case, here I was, coaching high school basketball at Bill Angelo St. Joseph when a lot of my buddies were still out, fighting in a war, and the government spent $300,000, educating me and training me, and now here I am, with my 3 boys and doing what I do to get to love. And at one point I hit rock bottom. When I speak about suicide, it's very near and dear to my heart because I was suicidal. I was sick enough where I really thought my wife and my kids would be better off without me. And so, when I use the hashtag winners win, it means, picking yourself up by your bootstraps and understanding that the only way to truly fail in life is to quit. And at that point in my life, if it weren't for my wife loving me when I probably didn't deserve her love, I wouldn't be here today, and I darn sure wouldn't be the youngest civilian agent Secretary of the Army. So, now every day I say to myself, what, maybe there's just one person that I can touch. Maybe there's one person that was as sick as I was. And if I can just grab that one person, and maybe that person plays for me, and maybe that person doesn't, Corey. But at the end of the day, I can guarantee you one thing: if you do play for me, I'm going to do everything in my ability to make sure that you're the best version, of yourself, or try your damnedest to be the best version of yourself. And that's just what I try to do, every day. And for me, that's what winners do, right? Losers sit there and think the way I was thinking when I was sick, and that, hey, everybody would be better off without me. Maybe I should just check out. The one thing is as long as you're still alive and you're still breathing, every day is truly a blessing. And if you're alive and if you're still fit to fight, then you can always make it better. You can always, fix whether it's a relationship or or a program, or health. You have folks that are fighting cancer and fighting diseases. The only way to truly fail in life is to say, you know what, I'm not going to try anymore. And if you can just get that sustained effort every day, then to me you have a winner's mindset, and that's what winners do is they win everything they can. And I try to preach that to my guys every day, right? Like, think about how much your life changes if you say, okay, I'm going to win. I'm going to walk in a Spanish class today, and I'm going to win. Then I'm going to go to the weight room, and I'm going to win. And then I'm going to go into practice, and every freaking drill, I'm going to win. And that's something we just constantly, pound into our players. And I pound it into my sons. My oldest son's a 10th grader. He'll play for me this year. I mean, he plays 4 sports in a day and age where people specialize. He plays 4 sports, 2 in one season, and he's got a 4.7 in all honors classes. And to me, I mean, a lot of that is because he's blessed with his mother's genes. But I also think, since he was, he was born in Fort Lewis up in Seattle, and since he was 2 years old, I've taught him to compete in everything. And the final outcome isn't what's important. What's most important is maximum effort, and always giving that, because that's what you owe. That's what you owe. That's what you owe. To God for giving you these gifts for being on earth.
And at the end of the day, you lose a basketball game at VASJ, you get injured, something doesn't go your way. You're still playing basketball. You're still living in America, which isn't perfect, but a lot better than 99% of the other places on earth. One thing that I had a realization in when I first started coaching AAU, I had a team of 100% inner city kids, Queen City Prophets, longtime program in Cincinnati of almost exclusively inner city kids. And we had a lot of kids from extremely underprivileged situations. But I realized this, and I tried to preach this to the best of my abilities, to some success and some failure, was that if you're 6'3", 6'4", 200 pounds, muscle, have athletic ability, have some God-given physical tools, able to earn a basketball scholarship off of those tools if you work at it, how much more blessed are you than the kids in your neighborhood who have to deal with the same neighborhood issues you have to deal with, same socioeconomic deals, but they don't have that basketball aspect. They've got no way out. You've got minimum one way out. And, that to me is gratitude. And, it's one of the most important things in terms of coaching basketball, in my opinion.
Oh, yeah. Well, last week we had our 20th West Point reunion. And we had about 500 of our classmates up there. I mean, many of which are doing incredible things. One of my best friends is, commanding a Ranger battalion. I mean, you're talking about, just some pretty outstanding stuff. And it's amazing, Corey, because every single person comes up, and to me and my wife's my 1999 classmate, they're like, and maybe it's through social media, but they're like, Captain Kwaz, love what you're doing. It's just unbelievable what you're doing in that area with that school. And then they asked Laura, what do you do? It's, she's just a doctor, fighting cancer every day. And but it's just amazing, how leaders view how important the coach is, right? Meaning, and I'm not just talking about myself and my position, but I'm talking about anyone that's coaching, and just how vital of a role they play in the maturation of a young person's life, and just how they can literally change their life. And I guess that's what it comes down to, is you got to ask yourself, hey, man, is it going to be easy? No, it's not going to be easy, but is it going to be worth it? And if you can reach, one kid, it's definitely worth it. And I've been blessed, I think, to reach a bunch of kids, and that's made it, in my case, that's made it very worth it.
Well, that's an excellent perspective, Coach. So I want to absolutely thank you for your time. I think this is one of the most interesting episodes we've ever had in terms of perspective on basketball, perspective on coaching, and perspective on, today's generation and all the things going on in the world. So thank you for your time, and we certainly wish you guys best of luck with the season coming right around the corner.
Thank you, Corey. Thank you so much for having me on. Jason, thank you, man. I know you do a lot of great things down there, too. I don't do a good enough job of getting down there to you guys, but, now hopefully we'll wake up sometime in the near future, and I truly appreciate everything you guys do for our great game in Ohio, man. Everyone talks about the coaches being the last of the Cowboys. You guys are great, man, and we couldn't grow this great game without you guys. So thank you so much.
All right, we appreciate that. Well, guys, that was Coach Babe Kwasniak, Cleveland VASJ St. Joe's, and you listen to the Triple Double Podcast. you guys listening to this podcast and getting that basketball itch, the season's coming up real quick, and we've got just the cure for your basketball flu. We have the Ohio Valley Hoops Classic, the 5th annual edition, held in November 29th and 30th at Mason Arena in Mason, Ohio. This is the first year that Triple Double Prospects and myself are involved with this event, but Benny Carroll has been doing a great job for 5 years now and getting some of Ohio's best teams, and we also have a few teams from Indianapolis who are going to be attending this year. Top teams include Cincinnati Moeller, Cincinnati Taft, Cincinnati Woodward, Lakota East, Hilliard Bradley, Dayton Thurgood Marshall, Cleveland Lutheran East, and more. Remember, that's the Ohio Valley Hoops Classic, November 29th and 30th at Mason Arena, Mason High School, Mason, Ohio, and visit OhioValleyHoopsClassic.com for more information. Thanks, guys.